Thank you, guys. Good morning. What if I get the house up about 30% here? Can we do that a little bit just so I can see your guys' faces as we go? I like this to be as interactive as possible. And I wonder if we can get the little TEDx brain guy up here for this. The little guy with the skull that's emptying onto the screen. Can you guys get that up there for me? There he is. All right. I want to start off my presentation with a little thought experiment. There you guys are. I see you. Welcome this morning. So a little thought experiment, and I want you to go through it, and then I want you to put it aside for a minute. Here's the thought experiment. Suppose I could do that. Suppose I had infinite powers. This is a classic thought experiment. Infinite powers, and I could take your brain out of your skull, just like that little guy. It wouldn't spell anything out when I did it, like brain. It would just be your brain. And I could put it in a vat. And as the brain in the vat, I could dial into your brain the perfect existence. The perfect existence. And you wouldn't even know you were the brain of the vat. You would just be having the perfect existence. And because I have infinity powers, anything about that existence could be adjusted. It could be brought to any sort of perfection you needed. Because I have infinity powers, it could be constantly readjusted to your perfect needs. The question is, would you sign up to be the brain in the vat? No. A lot of no's out there. Well, it turns out, remember, because I have infinity powers, there's anything I can do to it. But there's something about the circumstance of being a brain in the vat that would have most people refuse the perfect existence. Isn't that interesting? What is it about that condition, the circumstance of being a brain in the vat, even though you would have no idea you were the brain in the vat, just that circumstance puts us on edge. That's not okay. Something's not right about that circumstance. Any theories what that might be? What is it about being a brain in the vat? I can make you think for yourselves. I have infinity powers.
Somebody else is in control.
No, I make you in control. It's infinity. I have infinite opportunity for my powers behind her.
It's just weird and creepy.
It's weird and creepy. It is weird and creepy, I will grant you that. I would posit that there is a more fundamental issue at work here. And I'm going to stop. You guys all have good ideas, but I'm going to move on here with that and say the following. That the one thing that happens by virtue of being the brain of the vat that cannot be altered, the only thing that can't be altered is the circumstance of being in the brain of the vat, is you do not exist to other people. You cease to exist to others. And through the course of this little discussion today, I hope to convince you that our existence and that our brains in relation to other brains, literally growing and feeding one another, is so vital to the human experience that you would forego the perfect experience if I could give that to you. Not only do we need those other brains, but I would also say that we need to be of service to those other brains. All right, so let's file that away. Put that aside for a second, all right? Remember that experiment, think about that. Secondly, let's talk about happiness. There's a lot of, you could imagine that you might be happy as that brain in the vat, but there's a lot of happiness literature out there, and I'm actually disturbed by the happiness literature. I'm unhappy with the happiness literature. Almost because it's very rare to find happiness literature that really defines happiness in a very thoughtful way. And I would say, I deal with a lot of addicts and alcoholics. I'm a physician, I'm an internist, but I'm also work in psychiatric hospitals and I work with addicts. And nobody happier than by heroin addicts when they get their first hit. That's woohoo, happy. Euphoria, pleasure. Is that happiness? Does that make somebody happy? Is that a happy life? I think we would all agree, no, not so much. I think happiness is more about flourishing and more about engagement and more about a good life. And you have to have a certain amount of pleasure and well-being. I'll grant you that. But this notion in our world that you have to be euphoric all the time to be happy, big mistake. That is not a good life necessarily. That doesn't create happiness. Again, the happiness seems to come in relation to others. I will tell you that I'm somebody that's had to deal with people at the end of their life often. And when people are struggling with trying to make meaning of life, trying to understand why they even lived, they will always come to the same conclusion, which is that the things they have done for others and the important relationships in their lives are what gave life its meaning, why they even lived. Okay, another thing for us to file away here. We have the brain in the vat, we have happiness. All right. Then myself, as I thought about these sorts of things, I started looking at my patients. Again, talking about the addicts and alcoholics again. And this is a little bit of a longer story. Now, before I tell you about the patients, I want to tell you about you guys. There's something going on in your population, particularly in college-age kids, that started bothering me. This whole hookup culture, you guys know what that is, right? A lot of hooking up, hanging out. Well, once you get to college, that is like institutionalized. And people in college age are sort of studied and they look at, what are your social options? And they'll always say the same thing. Well, I can hook up these random physical encounters one night with somebody I kind of know, no expectation that I'll ever see that person again, always intoxicated. All right. Friends with benefits. All right. Got check. Oh, yeah, looks great. We love each other. We're friends. And I was at University of Maryland one time, and I pointed that out, and I said, well, it looks great on paper. And some kid yelled out, yeah, so does communism. All right, point taken. Point taken. That's right. We are humans, and things that look good on paper don't necessarily translate to the human experience. And finally, these sort of joined at the hip relationships, which are rapidly developing relationship with somebody that you're sort of hiding out from the hookup culture. The hookup culture really bothered me, and I thought it was sort of fueling the alcohol binging on college campuses. So I was looking at that. Again, let's file that one away and look back at my patients. My patients are reaching outside of themselves to tolerate life, to tolerate feeling okay in their own skin. When you look at alcoholics and addicts, before they get sick with addiction, they have a very common comorbid condition. And that is they have a deficiency in the capacity for what we call emotional regulation. Now's when I get into the more brain stuff. I'm not just going to do the brain in the vat, I'm actually going to talk about brains in a second. Emotional regulation, they are dysregulated. Addicts are severely dysregulated. And a self, a being, a substrate that is dysregulated also feels inadequate and has trouble having esteem. It seems that emotional regulation is some of the foundation of our esteem and our sense of adequacy. Again, interesting. Dysregulated patients. Now, I found that most of my patients were dysregulated because of trauma. Well, what was it about trauma, meaning physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, interpersonal trauma, that caused them to be so unregulated emotionally? His emotions were too prolonged, too intense, and too negative. You guys many of you can appreciate this. When emotions just you don't feel okay in your own skin. They're too prolonged, too intense, too negative. Which begs the question, how does a normal, healthy person develop a flexible, integrated system of emotional regulation? That really is the goal of mental health, to be able to flexibly adapt and regulate our emotions. And it turns out we do that by developing rich interconnections in and amongst regions of our brain that ultimately feed to our prefrontal cortex. That's the part where we're all talking from today, our executive area. But it turns out that the emotional systems involved in regulation are much more complex than what we think of from a cognitive standpoint. Cognition, reasoning, thinking is somehow secondary. It feeds into emotion, but it is not primary for people, particularly for people that are severely dysregulated. So I'm very indebted to the work of Alan Shore and Peter Fonagy, and I will rely heavily on their research right now as I talk to you about what it is in humans that develops this capacity for emotional regulation. Is that interesting to you? And you'll see that it will harken back to the brain in the vat and to your issues with your whole hookup culture and what a missed opportunity the social landscape provides you these days. So it turns out that emotional regulation is primarily, Pinsky in the brain we're singing about the right brain, the left hemisphere, right and left hemispheres. Emotional regulation is primarily a function of the right brain. The right brain is the more holistic, bodily-based experience of the world. In other words, we are born into the world primarily functioning from the standpoint of our right brain. Left brain is not developed yet. There's not language. There isn't logic. We are just initially a wash in emotions. Things kind of come over us, and we learn is probably not the right word, by virtue of the proximity of other people. And most of this research is done on mom, so I'll be using mom-baby as the basic paradigm. Mom's closeness to us allows us to resonate with her body. Literally, when you look at babies and moms together, Literally, their pupillary movements start to time together. Their pulses go together. There's a certain genetic fittedness in these biological, rhythmic interactions between mother and child that are deeply bodily based in our autonomic nervous system, and that there's some sort of intersubjective exchange, right brain to right brain, no language. Babies don't have language that allows them to soothe and regulate. As we grow up, it turns out Peter Fonagy has a theory that we are born with something called a contingency detection monitor. That is to say, things that are 100% contingent upon us, we are fascinated with the first 6 months of life. Well, that's like looking at our hands, and we pee and we poo, and we're interested in putting things in our mouth. We're interested on things contained within our body boundary. At about 6 months of age, we shift to partial contingencies. So things that happen in the world as the result of us become a focus. And we naturally become focused when we have emotions on how other humans, those close around us, react to us. So let me tell you a basic paradigm, and this is a phenomenon, what we call an intersubjective exchange, that you can use throughout your lifespan. It's not just between mothers and babies. It's something we use all the time throughout our life to build the capacity to regulate our own emotions. We do it intrasubjectively before we do it autonomously. Autonomously, ruptured from the intersubjective exchange, we tend to wall things off and hide from and disintegrate and lack the interconnections that are enhanced by joy and positive affects that are exchanged between two people. So consider this exchange. A baby has an emotion that washes over him or her. And the baby comes up, the mom examines the baby. First thing the mom does is takes a look at that baby and tries to figure out what's going on. Baby learns minds have content. My mind has a content, and another person can understand it. And what does the mom do? When the baby's having an intense emotion, and the mom runs up to the baby, and what is first thing she does? Well, you can't say anything. It's a baby. They don't have any language yet. Picks them up, but there's a first thing is that during that examination, there's a face-to-face exchange. And here's what we actually do, don't we? We go, I see you, baby. We do something weird with our voice. We do something weird with our face. And it turns out that the research shows that is a representation. A famous psychoanalyst from the way in the past said, the mom looks like what she sees in the baby. She literally signals on her face, not her constitutional state, but an appreciation of what the baby is feeling. It's a second-order representation. And that establishes a boundary between the baby and the mom. The mom isn't overcome by the baby's emotion or doesn't take on, it's not a contagious expression. It's a signal that I appreciate what's going on in you, and I understand it, I can name it, and see it on my face, and now, yes, that's my emotion, and mom offers some soothing affects alongside of that, and that's the basic unit. That is the basic unit. And there's much deeper, more magical stuff associated with this. I see my time is running up, but I want to tell you one quick story. There are things, if you open yourself to this experience of intersubjectivity, you will be amazed by it. We're sort of abandoning the world of a single skull system and entering the world of two skulls, where two skulls co-create something. And in my work, I get in situations where if I just open myself and think and just open myself to the experience of being with the other person, extraordinary things happen. I had one patient one time, he'd come in the room, very severe trauma survivor, and would tell me terrible stories when he'd come in the room. And every time he'd come in the room, I'd hear the opening sequence of the Mad Men music. You know, Mad Men TV show? I'd hear that bum, 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 and all of a sudden I feel like I was falling through the buildings. I was that little dark character falling. I thought, wow, that's weird. That's not something I feel normally. That must be something to do with what we're sharing together here. But I just observed it, filed it away, and went on, and every day he'd come in, there you hear that music again, wow, crazy. And one day he's sitting there telling me these terrible things, and the music opened up, and I feel like I'm falling through the buildings again, and all of a sudden, it wasn't just me falling through the building, all of a sudden, I was an infant falling in the building. And I thought, oh my God, it just took my breath away, and I stopped the session, I said, excuse me, I've got to tell you, I'm having an experience that I know it's not mine, it's something very intense, so it must mean something to you, so let me bring it up. And I described it to him, and he got up and stormed out of the room, was furious with me. Came back the next day and went, how did you know? In my head, always I hear this screaming baby, and it was almost threatening to acknowledge that feeling was there, but knowing that I was that deeply understood and you felt my feelings, it was because of that attunement. Now, I was a little bit overcome by it, but I was able to go, with my face signal to him that I had a deep, profound appreciation of what was happening to him. He couldn't tolerate it. He came back. We maintained our boundaries, and we continued to work about these intersubjective exchanges that allow for our brains to access parts of our emotional system that we wouldn't normally access on ourselves, integrate, literally build wiring, have enhanced positive affects that are growth enhancing. I'm trying to convince you that it's other people that make life meaningful and that give us health and emotional health and literally feed and grow our brains. Can you think of, in my half a minute remaining, other alternative ways that you might spend your social lives than hooking up that would actually enhance or feed off of this basic paradigm of sitting with another person and just listening and expressing an appreciation back? How about if you did that at a meal? You were interested in somebody, attracted, interested, and you sat down, you had a meal with them, and you just appreciate what was going on. And what if one of those people called you back and asked to do it again? Oh my God, that would be unbelievable. Okay, we used to call that a date. I don't know what you guys are going to call it, but I challenge you to use this system, which is available to you across the lifespan, that you are squandering now in your young adult lives, and there's opportunity for health and growth and not mistakes and not all the adverse outcomes that I see because of alcohol binging. I hope you will take this to heart and consider this as you make your social choices going forward. The other people in your life is really what makes life meaningful. Thank you very much.